Picture Turnberry in 2009. 59-year-old man, 8 major championships, 32 years removed from his greatest duel, standing on the 72nd tee of the Open Championship needing a par to win. He hits it well, his approach finds the back of the green. He chips, he putts, and the ball slides past the hole. He makes bogey. Stewart Cink wins the playoff comfortably, and Tom Watson stands on the 18th green, at a place he once made immortal, one shot away from the most romantic victory in the history of golf, holding nothing. That is where this story begins. Here's the full story. If you know Tom Watson only as a name attached to old highlights and polite retrospectives, you do not know Tom Watson. He was, for a sustained stretch of the late 1970s and early 1980s, the most feared golfer on the planet. Not one of the most feared. The most. He displaced Jack Nicklaus at the top of the game, at the very moment Nicklaus was still in his competitive prime, which is one of the most difficult things a golfer can do, and which very few in history have managed. He won 5 Open Championships, mastering links golf in a way that defied the conventional wisdom that American players could not fully read and conquer British conditions. He won the Masters twice. He won the US Open. He compiled 8 major championships in total, a number that belongs on a very short list. And he did all of it with a quiet, particular decency. Watson was never a showman. He did not seek conflict or manufacture headlines. He arrived each week, prepared meticulously, competed with an absolute refusal to be intimidated by anyone or anything, and then went home. The galleries loved him not because he gave them theater, but because the golf he played was so clean and so honest, that watching it felt like watching the sport at its best. The tragedy entered his life not through failure but through love. Bruce Edwards was Tom Watson's caddy for more than 30 years. Calling him a caddy understates it considerably. He was a companion, a trusted reader of greens and conditions, a steady presence through every triumph and disappointment. Watson described him as one of his closest friends. During the years when Watson was winning majors and dueling Nicklaus, Edwards was the man beside him, carrying the bag, reading the shots, keeping the atmosphere right. Their partnership became one of the great narratives in professional golf, not because it was dramatic, but because it was so complete. These were two men who knew each other deeply and trusted each other fully. In 2003, Bruce Edwards was diagnosed with ALS, amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, a disease with no cure, no treatment, that reverses its progression, and an outcome that is certain. It attacks the motor neurons that control the muscles, stripping a person's ability to move, speak, and eventually breathe. The diagnosis was catastrophic. Quick pause. If the loyalty Tom Watson showed Bruce Edwards represents something important to you about what friendship really means, type "that's loyalty" in the comments. If his story has never quite reached you before today, type "first time." I read every single one. Watson did not replace him. He kept Edwards on the bag through the illness, adjusting the arrangement as Edwards' physical capacity diminished, advocating loudly and publicly for ALS research, using every platform the sport gave him to put the disease in front of an audience that might fund the science needed to fight it. The image of Watson competing at the 2003 US Open at Olympia Fields, making an unlikely run up the leaderboard with his dying friend at his side, is one of the most emotionally overwhelming in the sport's history. It was not about the result. It was about what it means to not leave someone behind, when leaving them would be easier. Bruce Edwards died in April 2004, on the opening day of the Masters. Watson kept going. He competed, he contributed to the sport, he built friendships with the next generation of players who came through after his era. He became the kind of retired champion who adds, rather than diminishes, whose presence at major championships feels appropriate rather than nostalgic. And then came Turnberry in 2009, the same course where Watson and Nicklaus had produced their greatest duel in 1977, the same links where Watson had first announced himself as a force capable of beating anyone. He was 59 years old. The field included the best players of the current era, and Watson was not expected to contend. Nobody expected what happened. Through 4 days of competition, Watson played golf that belonged to his prime. Precise, controlled, links-intelligent golf that the wind and the fescue and the slopes of Turnberry seemed to reward specifically. He led going into the final round. He led coming down the final stretch. He led standing on the 72nd tee. He needed a par. He hit a good drive. His approach to the final green was struck on a line that should have found the putting surface, but it pitched fractionally long and rolled over the back edge. His chip did not get close enough. His putt to win the Open Championship at age 59 did not go in. Stewart Cink beat him in the playoff without particular drama. Watson was gracious afterward, achingly, characteristically gracious. He said it would have been a hell of a story. He smiled. He thanked the gallery. He conducted himself with the same quiet dignity that has always marked how he moves through the world, and the golf world watched one of the most beloved figures the sport has ever produced fall just short of something so extraordinary that its loss felt genuinely grievous. There is a specific detail from the Turnberry 2009 week that has never quite left the people who were there. When Watson stood over his chip on the 72nd hole, the crowd that had been following him all week fell completely silent. Not the polite silence of spectators respecting a shot. A different kind of silence. The kind that descends when everyone present understands that something historic might be happening and does not want to be the thing that breaks the spell. Watson chipped, the ball rolled past the hole, and the silence changed its meaning entirely. What had been anticipation became grief in the space of 3 seconds. Grown men and women who had been cheering since Thursday were standing at the 18th, with tears running down their faces. That is how much it mattered, not just to Watson, but to everyone who loves the sport and understands what 59 years old and 1 par meant in that moment. What has stayed with Tom Watson is not bitterness about any of it. He has spoken in recent years with the perspective of a man who has absorbed his losses and kept going, who understands that grief and gratitude can coexist, who has found a way to carry the loss of Edwards and the loss of Turnberry without being destroyed by either. He has been involved in course design, in broadcasting, in the mentorship of younger professionals who seek him out because his presence in a conversation raises the level of everything. He remains one of the most respected figures in golf, not despite the hardships but partly because of how he has carried them. What very few people outside professional golf circles know is the role Watson has played behind the scenes for the next generations of players. He is not a man who turned his back on the sport when his playing career faded. He has mentored players with a generosity that is not required of him, and that he has offered without fanfare. Jordan Spieth, who shares Watson's love of links golf and grew up in awe of his record, has spoken about conversations with Watson that he found genuinely formative. Spieth won the Open Championship in 2017, and his preparation for links golf carries Watson's fingerprints in ways that Spieth has acknowledged openly. When one of the best players of the current generation credits a man from a different era with shaping how he approaches the most historic major in golf, it says something real about the quality of what Watson brings to those conversations. He has also been one of the sport's most eloquent voices on the subject of sportsmanship and conduct. During the years when golf's culture wars were playing out most loudly, when LIV and the PGA Tour were at each other's throats, and players were taking public positions and firing off pointed statements, Watson was one of the few elder statesmen who spoke about the division with the perspective of someone who understood that the sport is bigger and older and more important than any single contract dispute. His was not always the loudest voice, but it was consistently one of the most trusted. And there is one more chapter in the Watson story that tends to go undiscussed because it involves private grief rather than public events. Watson's marriages and personal life have not been uncomplicated, and the people close to him over the decades have observed the toll that a lifetime of intense competition and extensive travel can take on everything outside the sport. He has navigated those realities with the same quiet dignity he has brought to everything else, not perfectly, not without cost, but with an evident commitment to not making other people pay publicly for his private struggles. That restraint is itself a form of class that the modern sports world finds increasingly rare. At 76, Tom Watson has survived things that would have broken most people and remained, by every account, exactly the person he has always been. That continuity of character, that refusal to become smaller, or harder, or less generous in the face of real loss, is its own kind of achievement. It may even be a greater one than the 8 major championships. He never won at Turnberry the second time. He never got Bruce Edwards back. Both of those absences are permanent. The tragedy is real, and so is everything else about Tom Watson, which is what makes the story worth knowing fully. If this one stayed with you, drop a like before you scroll away. It tells the algorithm to put this in front of other golf fans who appreciate the complete story of the legends, and subscribe, because there are more of these coming.